All right, the first skill we're going to practice is the flat wash, and you'll want to have a clean cup of clear water on hand. And we are going to pick any color that you want, and we are just going to do literally a flat, even coat of color in this whole box. But leave yourself a little space around the edges so that you don't bleed into your other colors. I'm going to use this brush. It's the bigger one that came in our kit. It's not, the greatest brush in the world, but it will help you cover a large area faster. But just be careful when you're dipping it into your paints because the bristles are pretty much exactly the size, if not a little bit bigger than the paint pan. So just watch out for contaminating your colors. So I'm going to dip my brush in the water and press it against the sides a little bit to get some of the extra out. You can run it along the rim too, but you will need a little bit of water on your brush. So it just takes getting used to. You do not, however, want so much water on your brush that it's dripping out or that there's a huge puddle of water in your paint pan. So I am going to just pick a color, get a little bit more water because I waited. I'm just going to use blue, and I'm going to go over on both sides, just keeping my bristles inside the paint pan, letting the paint kind of get a little bit wetter there as the water loosens up the pigment. And once I feel like I've got a decent amount on my brush, again, that shouldn't be dripping or going all over the place, but once my brush is fairly loaded with color, I'm just going to come to my square, paint across my square, and I'm going to leave myself, like I said, a little space along the edges so that it doesn't bleed into my other squares. And the point of the flat wash is just to have one even area of color. Now, when you pick your brush up, you'll see that there is a little bit of water that stays behind on the paper when you pick your brush up, and that's what makes that little extra bit of wet, darker color. But usually, as long as, it's still wet, it'll disperse out into the rest of your color. So that's our flat wash. The next one is the graded wash. So I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm just kind of pressing against the sides. You can swirl your brush around. You don't want to mash it straight down. If you, take it to the side and press a little bit, you can, but never smash your brush down. That'll, flail out your bristles and deform your brush. All right, so a graded wash means that we are going to have more of one, more of a color on one side fading into less color. It's like a gradient. So you can use a different color if you want. You can use the same one. That's up to you. I'm going to just try green for this one. So I'm going to do the same thing. Get my green ready to go. Get a decent amount on my brush, but again, it shouldn't be dripping out or anything. I'm going to start from the top. I'm just going to pick my brush up. There's a little speck of blue in there that got in. And this doesn't look like there's a whole lot of difference there, and my brush is also kind of laying down color unevenly, so I'm going to go back, get a little bit more color. And I'm just going to go from the top down again. Because what you want for a graded wash is to have more color fading into less color. So I'm actually going to rinse the green out of my brush. I'm also going to use my paper towel to dab off some of the extra moisture, and I'm going to come from the bottom up and kind of pick up some of that color. I waited a little too long because you can see the color's not really coming up. But ideally what you want to have, and this isn't perfect, but we're just practicing, is a darker or more pigmented area fading into less pigment, so a gradient. That's with one color. So now a graded wash with two colors, you're going to be doing this, but with two separate colors moving towards each other. So I'm going to use green for one of my colors, and then I'll use blue for the other one to combine those two. So I'm going to get a little water on my brush, come back to my green, starting from the top. Should have, a decent amount of pigment, and then I'm going to just work down. I might get rid of a little pigment because it looks like it's staying in the brush pretty well. Hopefully by the bottom there is less green. All right, so I've kind of replicated this one here, but now I'm going to go from the bottom up using blue, and hopefully those two colors you will see will start to blend together. It's also important, if you can, change your water often. Green and blue are kind of similar. I'm not super worried about this, but if I were to switch to like a yellow, this water would definitely taint or contaminate my yellow. So change your water often. Okay, so now I'm going to get blue. And you want to try and kind of work a little fast, just so that the paints are still wet and have the chance to actually mix together. So I'm going to go over this bottom part fairly well, and then I'm just going to bring that color up. Get rid of some of that pigment because it, again, is really staying on my brush. By the time I get up to the top, hopefully there's less blue. So you should be able to see one color fading into the other, and you accomplish that again by starting with one heavily pigmented, going down, and hopefully you get less color as you go. Clean your brush, switch heavily pigmented area of another color, and as you move that paint up, hopefully you're having less and less color. If you need to use a paper towel to get some of the pigment off your brush, you can, because these are really kind of sticking around. All right, so the next one is a dry brush, and this one, obviously they're watercolors. They do need water to work, so it's just using slightly less water than normal. You do still need a little water on your brush, but just less. I'm gonna try using a red for this one. So I'm going to use water. I am gonna get the red, softened up with some water there, but before I go straight to the paper, like you can probably see that this is still a little bit wet. I'm going to dry off my brush a little bit just by tapping it on a paper towel. If there's a lot of moisture, hopefully some of that will come off. Doesn't look like there's a ton. So then I'm just going to paint a couple of streaks on the page because I want to see that texture at the edge of the brush, so it's not filled in like these ones are when the brush is more wet. Got a little eraser piece in there. But the dry brush, you want to be able to see the texture of the edge of the brush like that. So these are the first four. I'm going to pause the video now and I'll start a new demo for the second bit.